it's really ironic when I hear people saying that. Unfortunately, I don't use this as an insult, but it just shows a level of ignorance because they don't understand why we do the work we do. And actually, intimacy is so much more than that. And so we do have to create that kind of spaces where men can be intimate with each other and actually can care for each other and support each other. So that's mainly what I do on support. And Inspire really is the training. So obviously I do a lot of that training through the inclusive leadership work I do. I help people, but I think the biggest thing, probably the thing I'm proudest of, is I've actually developed a male allyship group coaching program. And when we talk about gender equality, and that's why International Women's Day is important. International Women's Day, I will still say, is also about fixing a system that damages men.
Hi, my name's Andrew Payne and welcome to the podcast Men On Show. And I am delighted to have Daniele Fiandaca here on the show. And is that how I pronounce your surname, Fiandaca?
Fiandaca, and it's Daniele.
Daniele Fiandaca.
Yes.
What a
Yes.
fantastic name. I like that as a name. I love the surname. The reason that Danielle is on
Daniele.
Daniele, I have to write that down. I've got a brain like a sieve. So Daniele, the reason I've got Daniele on the show is he's the founder of Token Man Consulting. It's an inclusion and diversity consultancy, trying to really bring men within the diversity, equality, and inclusion space, encouraging them to be change makers. Daniele is a trailblazer. I've always wanted to be known as a trailblazer. I feel like I'm not quite there yet. No one's yet described me as a trailblazer, but I'm not just saying that. You were named, I'm just checking my notes here, one of the top 50 trailblazers in gender equality in the UK. That is fantastic. Management Today's top 30 male agents of change. No one's ever described me as an agent either. I'd like to be an agent and a trailblazer. But Daniele, welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, and it's amazing to be here.
Cool. So, I want to get on to the fabulous work, really important work, particularly in today's environment that you're doing on allyship. But it's always important to me to understand a little bit about yourself growing up. And the question I always ask fellas when they come onto this is, well, what inspired you growing up? Is there somebody in particular that inspired you? Was there someone that you looked up to as a really positive role model? And if so, who was that? And what do they do for you?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I have to say it's really cheesy, but I'm going to have to say my parents, simply because my dad's an immigrant, came over to the UK with nothing. My mum comes from a working class family, and I was in Catholic school, being Catholic, and one day they took my parents into a classroom and said we can't give him the education he needs. Because I was too fast for the class. I mean, I got, and they said, we really do think you need to put him into public school. So I watched, and so I went to a boarding school actually from 8 to 13 with my brother, and I just watched my parents work just every hour just to give us that privilege. And they have, my work ethic comes from them, and I couldn't have been in a more loving, caring family if I wanted to. So I think that's really what I looked up to, and it really shaped what I did. I do remember when I got my first paycheck, I gave it to my dad to say thanks. And I should really have given it to my dad and mum now I look at things. But my dad was the breadwinner, but my mum was so important within that.
Yeah, yeah. That is amazing. What an amazing and lovely thing of you to do with that first paycheck. I can't imagine there's many of us that would go and give our first paycheck to our parents as a mark of respect. Says something about you actually. That's incredible. Just that one step. Do you recall growing up any particular challenges, things you struggled with that now looking back you would put down to being a male?
Uh, the answer's probably not, to be honest. I think no. But yeah, I mean, listen, there's no doubt if I look at where I got to. when my brother died 14 years ago and some of the challenges I had around grief, there's no doubt that that was driven from being a boy, becoming disconnected from my feelings, even though I had lo loving parents. You know, society tells me that I shouldn't show my feelings, disconnects me from my feelings. So I think it's until I started doing therapy about 4 or 5 years ago, I think I really had a challenge with being connected to those feelings. So the answer is yes. I mean, in being a boy and becoming a man, you know, I live in a society that doesn't put stereotypes, puts us into boxes, and um, I think to a certain extent, and it's probably, you know, one story I think is quite interesting as well is, you know, it also a lot of the time what I see is men act as they do sometimes because of the context they're in. So just to give you a very good example, I ran agency. So I used to work in advertising. I was a CEO of an agency. I ran an agency for 10 years, and also I was the head of innovation at um, I was a head of innovation at at an agency called Chow. But when I started Token Man, so I actually started Token Man 10 years ago as a platform to support men. I went and did a panel, my first ever panel under Token Man, and I did it with the head of the Fawcett Society, the woman that wrote the book Lean Out, which was kind of a response to Sheryl Sandberg's Lean In. And I remember just being so scared. You know, this is a man talking about gender equality and the challenges women face. And at the end of that panel, a guy came up to me who's become a really good friend, a guy called Hilary Gallo, and he just said, I want to give you my book, which was called The Power of Soft, because you have the power of soft. I can tell you now, no one that I've worked with in my career, in my agencies, would say I had the power of soft. And so for me, it was really interesting. It needed me to come out from a quite high pressured, stressful, you know, very positive, building a business to actually find a side of myself I didn't really know existed.
Because that is very interesting because obviously we're going to talk about allyship and I want to get into that. But I suppose this is linked to it, the sense of, you know, men not being able to show their true feelings. I feel like, just from my perspective, that has changed a lot. If we remember at the World Cup 1990, Gazza's tears was such a big thing. It was national front page headlines. Walker's Crisps created an advertising campaign out of that thing. Today, no, it's like normal. You see it all the time. Sports stars crying. You imagine the princes at Diana's funeral. I mean, it's awful. It looks like, for me, it's like child abuse watching them following a coffin, not able to have in their moment of grief, dad's arm around them. They had to walk in, what? Separately? What are you talking about? Yet today, those same boys are talking, real advocates for mental health. So I feel like it's changed, but do you feel it has?
I think you're overestimating the change that's happened. I mean, I speak quite a lot about my brother and losing my brother on stages. And, you know, it happened to me last year, and a guy came up to me and said, you know, my dad died two weeks ago. Thank you for sharing that. I've just realized that I was hiding the fact that I was crying to my kids. You know, I was ashamed of it. And I've realized now that that was wrong. And I'm going to go back to them tonight and I'm going to tell them that they need to cry. I need to cry. And that's part of the process. So I think I think you're overestimated the change that's happened.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I see it a lot. And I also see it, it's really interesting. We're talking about allyship because I think allyship works. It needs to be for everyone, right? We also need allies from the women in our lives, the other men in our lives. You know, we need allies from the people non-binary in our lives. We need allyship from everywhere. It's just, you know, equity just means certain groups at certain times need more support than others, and we need to recognize that. Um, but I can tell you now, some of those men that I work with, they will talk about as they got their journey, starting to share their feelings with their other halves, they're in heterosexual relationships. And the women just can't deal with the man on the other end showing their feelings. You know, really struggles with it and kind of tries to put it down and tries to shut it down because actually they just don't sometimes have the tools to actually have a man showing their feelings. So I think we're so far away from where we need to be. And
Yeah.
you're right. I mean, things have shifted. Now, parts of I'm parts of a number of men's group, including one called the Mandem. Um, and the conversations they have, they're mainly young men between 20 and 30, obviously, same age as me. Uh, but the conversations, the openness they have in that WhatsApp group with complete strangers just astounds me. It just
Yeah.
blows me away. So I am more positive, but at the same time, we have to recognize there's this a person called Andrew Tate that is having a significant impact on men. So, you know, because I think men aren't necessarily on that route and that journey, that aren't necessarily being given the support around them to go on that journey.
Okay, well, let's talk about allyship because you're doing tremendous work in that space. And I know if I was just doing a workshop for, I don't know, let's say I was doing a workshop for the NHS, range of professions coming in. If I then did a poll, how many of you know what allyship is and could correctly define it? I mean, some of the clue is in the name, but actually, a lot of us there's still some confusion. I typically hear that term in relation to men being allies for women for their suffering. Men shouldn't be toxic. Men shouldn't be bystanders. We need to, and like it's something quite active. I have another view of that term, which I'm happy to share. But you are the expert in this topic. It is your work. So please, how would you define allyship to those listening to this podcast who they've seen allyship in the title because it will be in the title and thought, well, what the hell's that? I'll have a listen. How do you describe it?
If I'm going to make it really simple, allyship is supporting those that need it, who need support. It really is as simple as that. I mean, the standard definition which we built on, I don't like the standard definition, but the standard definition is helping people from historically marginalized groups. Yeah, which will tend
Okay.
to be people different to you. So that's the standard definition. I run a male allyship program. I'm really proud of them because they're both cohorts have come up with a definition which is women, historically marginalized groups, and anyone that is struggling right now. And so that and is really important because that
Yeah.
and tells us as men that we need to support other men who might look exactly like us, who might just be struggling because they've just had their second child and they're struggling with not being able to sleep. They're struggling because they're going through a round of redundancies at work. They're feeling really stressed. They're the breadwinner, and actually they need support from those around them.
Yeah.
And so we need to step in. I think for me, what if I look at the work that I do in the workplace? Um, the reason I've kind of focused on women historically marginalized groups is because if we look at the workplace, it is women in historically marginalized groups that have far more barriers in the workplace than me as a white, straight, neurotypical cisgender man without disabilities. So that's just a reality. The barriers are real. The barriers, and we talk about, a lot of people get defensive around the word privilege, but the word privilege, a lot of people think privilege are the things that you have as opposed to the things you don't have. Well, actually, privilege in the workplace is all about the barriers you don't have. And there are significant barriers for women and other historically marginalized groups. And when I say historically marginalized groups, I'm talking about LGBTQ, I'm talking about people with disabilities, I'm talking about people of different ethnicities, I'm talking about neurodivergent, all, everyone has barriers that I never had. And that's the point. The point isn't because I've never had them, and also because I spent a lot of time in the in group, so the in group is the dominant group, I never saw them. And that's
Yeah.
and that's what a lot of people don't see. So people that tend to, use the term woke as a insult. One, don't understand what the word means. It just means being awake to other people's challenges. Why wouldn't you want to be awake to other people's challenges? But the reason they use it is because they're not awake to other people's challenges. So they don't understand why this stuff's important. So it's a really ironic when I hear people saying that. Unfortunately, I don't use this as an insult, but it just shows a level of ignorance because they don't understand why we do the work we do.
Yeah, I mean, I love that as a definition. I think you've made that very clear. I suppose only to add to what you're saying, I read a book called Humankind by author's name Ingrid Bregman, I think is the name. But the book's Humankind. It's a really interesting book. And it is a he talks about Nelson Mandela and how he reached out to one of the leaders of the Afrikaner movement in the build up to the South African elections when the Afrikaners were mobilizing, there was going to be a bloodbath. Um, and what he delivered to bring that down to a place where he was able to reach out, form relationship with formerly his oppressor was a masterclass, as I see it, an allyship in that he had this clandestine meeting. He served this Afrikaner tea. He knew about their history. He knew their language, could speak their language deliberately. And the first thing they talked about in that clandestine meeting was the challenges that the Afrikaner people have faced historically and how that shaped them. And this guy, Constant Viljoen, was the key, one of the key figures in the Afrikaner movement, was so blown away by Nelson Mandela's ability to reach him. And for me, that story as a guy is allyship, where as well as supporting others, it's reaching out, understanding their journey, and really taking time to go, well,
Yeah.
I don't know. I'll never know how it feels to be you because I'm me and you're you, but I can learn about what, like the allyship. The question I always hear: why do the immigrants want to come to Britain? Why don't they stay in France? And then the people that ask that question, they don't get any further than that question. They just feel very angry about it. But if they went and spoke to those immigrants and understood that English is a universal language due to colonialism, so of course you're going to go to a country where you speak the language, your mother country, and a lot of them see Britain as their mother country because you don't understand. So for me, allyship is about a reaching out. Does that sit with you as well as a thing?
Yeah, I think it's about recognizing your responsibility and also recognizing your influence. So I think for me it's understanding, I have white privilege, I have male privilege. In certain contexts, I'm going to just caveat that male privilege comment. And I'm privileged. And so for me, it's about understanding what can I do to help shape change. I think the reality is, though, not every man's in the place right now to shape change. And I think, that's what some of the narrative I think is really jarring for some people because they're like going, you're asking me to a male ally, but I'm really struggling right now and I'm not getting any support myself. That's why I'm talking about allyship needs to be for everyone. So if we look at
Yeah,
the UK, for example, the white working class men who have been historically marginalized and should be included by the EDI movement um, haven't. And so they have been let down. And while that anger, I don't agree with where that anger comes from, how it comes out. And it does, it doesn't mean we don't have to at least pay attention to what's happening and actually go, okay, what support can we give? So I think
yeah,
for me, and when I do the moralship course, we do talk about the need for men to support other men, I think on International Men's Day, I've done it 2 years now. I've just ran my own little campaign. It hasn't got very far, but own little campaign to get more men to tell each other they love each other because, it's amazing. There's a brilliant video, I think it's from New Zealand, where they get men for the first time, they capture them telling each other that they love each other. And it's just, just the reactions and are you okay? Is everything okay? Is everything okay? A real worry for someone when they do that. But
yeah,
I think that comes down to that feelings bit. We have to create, and I think and I think I saw something around the fact that if you think about feminism has given women that ability to get together over the last 50 years and really build that kind of sense of belonging and purpose that men just haven't had. And so what's happening now is that as the world shifts and men don't become someone said to me, I ran a workshop this week actually, it was a together space, and someone said I'd like men to become non-reliant on women in the same way women have become non-reliant on men. And I thought that was such a brilliant, insightful piece. Often we can be defined by what we've done in our career, who we're with, what we've done, and actually we need to have that sense of purpose in ourselves. And I think and I've got a complete blank now. We had a very Susie Allback, a very famous psychoanalyst, spoke I run an event called Masculinity in the Workplace every year on International Men's Day, And she said something that's really stuck with me because I see it the whole time. And she says, I see too many men on stilts who are hollow inside.
Yeah, that's
What she
yeah,
was talk what she was talking about is men who get to that senior level in companies, work really hard to do it, given up a lot, sacrificed a lot, in most cases, family and time with that family, and they get to that position and they go, I've been focusing on the wrong thing. This isn't what really this isn't what really defines me, and that's where we get midlife crisis. That's where we get that crisis of confidence because you can't get back that time you miss with your kids as they grow up. You're just not going to get it back.
yeah. I mean, I would say just coming back slightly on a few things that you said, not to come back in the defensive, but just to kind of add to them. The I think when we talk to certain groups of men about privilege, that's very difficult for them to hear. Like we know when it comes to areas of deprivation, you're 10 times more likely to go to prison if you live in an area of deprivation than in the most affluent area. You're twice as likely to die by suicide in areas if you live in areas of deprivation than areas of affluence. So there are some groups of men that find that very hard to hear. You know, when we talk about the patriarchy, toxic masculinity, privilege. And I believe that within the group that is men, there has been a historic privilege and still is on many levels. But within that group that is men, there are groups who are hugely disadvantaged. And so for me, allyship is, as you say, reaching out to all groups that need support. I think that's a beautiful definition of it. But tell me about the work that you're doing, because it really inspired me, challenged me, made me ponder. Some of your work's quite innovative. You were talking about a nail salon. You were talking about wearing dresses. You do workshops. So tell me what you're doing. Tell me why you're doing it and what that impact is.
So I do a number of things. I'll talk about hard as nails in a minute. I'm actually learning to become a nail technician at the moment, and I just didn't. Painting your own nails is really hard. So I had an event this week, so I only really had the energy and time to do one nail, but I usually have them fully painted. So I do probably the best thing to do is I basically work with corporates, and I do three things. I help them on their I help them to better engage men. So one half of what I do is inclusive leadership. So I do a lot of inclusive leadership work. There's 6 month programs, and that's everyone, right? That's not just focused on men. That's bringing everyone through that program. But then I think the other 50% I do is working with men, and so I really help clients get away from just saying to men, become better allies. I think, the challenge with saying male, talking, focusing male allies, and it came up again in that workshop this week, is by saying we need more male allies, we're suggesting that the fixing of the system that we're doing doesn't benefit men, but it does. And that's the thing that we need to shift is get to understand that the system is broken for almost everyone. When I say almost everyone, it's not broken for the oligarchs. They're quite happy with the system right now. But beyond that, the system is damaging men significantly. We just need to look at the suicide rates. We just need to look at prison, as you say, prison, the number of prisoners there are. I think the system is broken and we need to fix that system. And everyone is being impacted in some way by that system. And the only way we're going to change it is together. So, but what's happened within organizations, they've just gone, men, you need to be better allies. And so when you think about, so Ipsos did some studies 2 years ago, I think now, and they looked at and they found that 53% of men in the UK think gender equality has gone too far and is now discriminating against men. Okay, uh, that's quote is comes from ignorance because I work in companies every day. And while it must be frustrating that all of a sudden women are getting promoted at the same rates as men, it's at the same rates as men. Yes, before you used to, as a man, having that privilege of that increased percentage, and that's gone, and that feels like something being taken away. But all we're talking about is a system that's more fair, respectful, and actually delivers better results to those men. So if you're saying to one of those men that's in that 53%, you need to become a better ally and you don't spend the time actually understanding their issues, supporting them, you're never going to bring them on the journey. So that's why It's no coincidence that all the studies I've done, everyone will say no more than 40% of men are active allies in their organization. Well, when you've got 53% that think gender equality has gone too far, it's no surprise, right?
Yeah.
There's that 7% that you probably can convert. So I help companies bring men on the journey by supporting them, inspiring them, and recruiting them. So supporting them is recognizing that men have their own issues, men have their own challenges. So a lot of those issues are societal. So if we look at, and anyone listening to this, I love your question at the beginning. What did I experience as a man? And I talked about feelings and the emotions and some of the damage that did, initially through my grief process, where um, I did medicate without going into details, but I did medicate. I did do the normal thing of trying to cope through um, drugs and alcohol. And the reality is that was because I didn't want the pain to come in. Yeah, I couldn't deal with it. I couldn't handle the pain. And so it took me to open up to go on my own journey. And so, again, if anyone's listening to this, do come. I do Brave Spaces, and again, come on to the support bit. So I run Brave Spaces specifically for men, and I do that for free as well. So I do one a month, and I do Brave Spaces around topics that men wouldn't normally talk about. So in the corporate space, that might be being a father in the workplace, that might be becoming a better partner, that might be becoming a better ally, that might be becoming more comfortable with being uncomfortable. So I've obviously got my workplace ones, but outside the workplace, I do things, my next session at the end of March is navigating grief. I've then got sessions coming up. I've done sessions on sex and intimacy, and sex and intimacy was fascinating. There was five of us on it, five strangers. I had men talk about things they'd never ever told people before. But David Chambers, who's a brilliant man in this space, do look him up. He just said, you do realize that what you've just created is a really intimate space for these men. And so he just made us, and I purposely pulled David in because David is a specialist within sex and intimacy and works a lot with men on that side. But he just completely repositioned and redid what we saw, what I saw as intimacy. Intimacy was always attached to sex. And actually, intimacy is so much more than that. And intimacy and that. And so we do have to create that kind of spaces where men can be intimate with each other and actually can care for each other and support each other. So that's mainly what I do on support. Then Inspire really is the training. So obviously I do a lot of that training through the inclusive leadership work I do. I help people, but I think the biggest thing, probably the thing I'm proudest of, is I've actually developed a male allyship group coaching program. It's 14 weeks, 7 sessions. I've now had 24 men go through it, and it's it's really hard for me to say, but the feedback I get is brilliant. But
Yeah.
what I love about it is I get to watch in real time as those men shift.
Yeah.
And that's the most satisfying thing in the world. And it's the same with coaching, to be honest. Coaching, I get that same buzz, is you can really see, and this is what I say to everyone. I know there are some people that are probably struggling right now and go, I can't be an ally. And we can all be allies. Doesn't matter where we are in our lives. You can make a difference to one person's life so easily. Yeah,
Yeah.
even just telling them on a certain day at a certain time that you really love them and appreciate them may completely change that day. It may change the trajectory of the week. That week may. So I think we can all have a positive impact on human beings every day.
Yeah. And one question I sometimes get asked is because I talk about the role of men's communities. I've had some fantastic male community builders on this podcast, from Men in Sheds, Grieving Pint, Proper Blokes Club, and there's a couple of others whose names now escape me, but we've done quite a few episodes. But was well, can women support men? Can women be allies for men? And there's a fantastic example of a high level furniture company that I delivered to last November on Men's International Day. And it was the women's network who they promoted the talk I was doing for men. They were the ones that went out into the warehouse, sort of not pleading, but talking with supervisors saying, we want you to release the men for this session. This is important. Please do not make it difficult for the guys to leave the shop floor. And the numbers were amazing, all because the women's network were being allies for men. And I feel like women have a massive part to play in supporting men, and we should therefore also. And as I said to them, to those that were there on World Menopause Day, guys, get yourself a lot, get involved. You know, your sisters,
Mm.
your wives, your partners, your female colleagues. You know, the women's network here have done you proud, and it's time for you as well to do them proud as well. So I feel like it is a two-way thing. It's a cross-cultural, cross-gender term. I think the work you're doing is amazing. I didn't know before the podcast that you do those different things in the way that you do. Tell me, I want to talk about the events in America and how that perhaps affects your work, how you see that. I think that's important. The the thing you paint your nails. You sometimes wear a dress. You've got a nail bar. You're learning to be a nail technician. And this is just like I know for me, like what do I want to do? I want to go play football, so I do. I want to dive off diving boards, have my diving lessons. They literally it does something to my
Yeah,
soul
yeah, yeah.
diving off those boards. I had a bad day yesterday. Just I was saying to my wife actually, I'm struggling mentally this week. I feel like I've lost my mojo. Come back from a diving lesson. I've actually learned to dive backwards now for the first time.
Well
I
done.
was like,
Very good.
I feel amazing today because of that. And she is my ally because she, with the busy household, she knows how important that is. She supports me in that work and all of that. But those things that you do, those active steps, painting your nails and things like, uh, do you do those because you feel driven to do them? You want to do them? Do you feel that's part of your personality? I've got a male friend who enjoys sometimes dressing up as a woman, sometimes dressing up as a guy. Depends what day it is. Do you do them as a symbolic gesture? Um, what drives you in some of those initiatives?
So I've won a Scot twice. I've got a brand new one, which I'm waiting to do. I'm working out the first event to do it in. I do it because I want to break stereotypes and show how ridiculously stereotypes are.
Yeah,
It's as simple as that. So, I Sam Conniff Allende is a good friend of mine. He wrote the book Be More Pirate, and he wrote a post a year and a bit ago. He just wrote a blog post about an experience he had, and he basically went to a Harry Styles concert. His daughter convinced him to get his nails done because Harry Styles does get his nails done, and a lot of
yeah,
people get his nails done. He got to Sunday night. He went. He had fun. He got his nails done at a nail salon, and then he said to his daughter, "Can you take them off for me?" She said, "I can't take them off, Dad. They're shellac." And so he got stuck with them for a whole week because he couldn't, he was so busy. And he just said it opened up so many conversations that he
yeah,
just didn't expect. And so he wrote a little post saying, and he called it Hard as Nails. And he just wrote this post saying, is this performative nonsense or is there something in this? And he said, if anyone wants, and he then wrote a press release, right? This kind of fake press release around this movement. And then it was just a blog post. And so last year, no, the year before, so not last Christmas, the Christmas before, I'd read that blog post. I'd got a call with Sam. It took us 5 months to get the call in. But I said to him, well, Christmas coming up. I said, okay, I'm going to paint my nails for a week. I really love it. I told him, I called him because I said, I love this idea. I want us to do something with it. But I can't tell you whether I want to be in until I paint my nails myself. And I did it. And it just, firstly, it didn't make me feel uncomfortable, but there was a tiny bit of uncomfortableness, but you did notice that people were reacting to you differently. It did open up really interesting conversations
yeah,
around masculinity, uh, and um, and the reality is it gave me a real connection. I think the real killer for me, it gave me a connection with the the young girls, the young women in my life, my nieces, my
yeah.
goddaughters, that I didn't, I've now gone to, been to nail salons with my niece, with my goddaughter, and just sitting next to her, I had a conversation that I wouldn't normally have. And so for me, just that itself's been amazing. But what then happened is we did a beta test, and those beta tests, I think we had 14 men that came on board in that beta test. And what was something quite amazing happened actually, is we actually had three bisexual men out of that 14. And if you think about the world, bisexual men, you don't meet that many. But at one point, all three were speaking together, and I went, "Wow, isn't this amazing that we just pulled these people together?" And I also had feedback from gay men saying, "I love what you're doing, but I just let you know, I'm just not confident of doing it because of fear, just fear." And being scared of what might happen as a gay man, whatever happens, if I get challenged in a pub, I can still say it sounds horrible, but I can still say I'm straight, and unfortunately, they will be more understanding, right?
Yeah.
So, but for me, it just shows that, I did wear a skirt in Pride, believe it or not. I wore it in Pride. I wore it with a child. I went with a child line. I had a child line t-shirt on. My wife is a child line counselor. I'm very proud of her. Within 1 week, I was being called a paedophile on Twitter. Because I was wearing a childline t-shirt and wearing a skirt. So the level of hate, and again, so we're not. We aren't asking men to paint nails to be better allies to women. We're not doing that. We're actually asking men to paint their nails to be better for themselves and other men. And what I mean by that is open up real meaningful conversations. One guy hasn't even painted his nails, already told someone we're having a conversation, and the guy's going, "Oh, why do men need to dress as women?" And I'm like, what's that got to do with dressing as women? Why do you want to put me in this box? I can't put polish on my nails. I mean, it is ludicrous, but what we're also doing is then using that to open up other conversations about where we're putting boxes. So not showing our
Yeah.
emotions, uh, men still struggling actually to take the primary caregiver role at home. And when we talk about gender equality, and that's why, International Women's Day is important, but International Women's Day, I will still say, is also about fixing a system that damages men. And so for me, the work that I'm doing, I'm not doing the work to help women marginalize. I'm actually doing the work to help humanity because we have a system at the moment that's broken. And so through a small thing like getting men to paint their nails for 1 week, it is opening up their minds to being more comfortable being uncomfortable, being more curious, open up conversations, actually thinking about masculinity, actually thinking about mental health. I mean, nails are actually quite a nice way they're quite therapeutic. You go to a nail bar, you spend half an hour, 45 minutes, an hour. It's good for your mental health. So for me, I'm training to become a nail technician. My mum wants me to open a nail bar, and it's really interesting. I do so much stuff, and it's really interesting. I've had a fractious relationship with my mum. Um, because doesn't support most of the work I do. This is the
Right.
first thing she's got excited about. She wants me
Ah,
to, yeah, really, and she wants me, and so for me, she said, "What?" She started talking about nail bars, and I didn't do it. In my head, there was nothing. There was no nail bars in my future. Might be a one-day pop-up in somewhere where, as a man, I come in to allow people to come in. But she's now put an idea in my head that who knows? Who knows where it'll go? But I think the reality is the quality. And if anyone wants to go to my LinkedIn, and we'll also give you links. But just the feedback we've had from the beta testers about what it's done for them
yeah.
has been phenomenal.
Yeah, if it starts conversations, that is great. Tell me, because I'm conscious of time, and I wanted to talk and sort of end here really on where we see DEI going. We've had the rollback in America with the Trump administration, and I'm sure there'll be many twists and turns in the next 4 years and maybe more. Do you see that affecting DEI here in the UK? Do you feel like here in the UK we're saying, well, stuff Trump, we know it's, or is it making people here doubtful? Are we, do we need to copy America? Is Trump right? Do we need to move in the right direction? What do you think's been the impact for you? What do you see?
I mean, I think the first thing I'm going to have to say, and everyone, we have the right to disagree, but Trump is not right. Trump is not right about many things, but on this
I
one,
agree
he
with
did.
you on
Yeah,
that.
no,
I
I
agree
know
with
you
you.
do, I know you do, I
Yeah.
know you do. But
Yeah.
I think the reality is, Trump he has always been successful at creating disconnection divides, and he's created an even bigger divide. And so this is his modus operandi. He's focused on this one area. The damage that's being done to the trans community in particular right now in the States is heartbreaking. He is killing people. There are the amount of the suicide rate for trans people is so high, and what they're having to go through in the States is horrendous. I mean, it just breaks my heart. But it's affecting almost everyone that comes from historically marginalized groups. Women's rights, reproductive rights are under attack. There's so much damage he's doing. Is it affecting here? I can tell you, I lost a piece of work next week because of Trump. So it was an American-led company. They're not allowed to say the word allyship anymore. It's been banned. You will not believe just some of the stuff and the fear.
In the land of the free, allyship has been banned.
Oh, it's been
Yeah,
banned. It's been
yeah.
banned within their company. So,
How
as if you think
freeing, yeah.
it is, I know, totally. And actually, funny enough, there's a website that tracks around the world countries, and it has definitions of what democracy and autocracy is. America has moved away from being democracy under their definitions, which is really interesting. So I think it does. I think it does impact, and I think it's there's a. And I said it last time when he was last in. They kind of when he first came in, we were like, when the world is changing, sometimes you get those people that don't want it to change come back and hit back. That's what we're seeing with Trump. Okay, he is one of the most. He's very intelligent. He's an intelligent man, a clever man, very manipulative man, but he is so ignorant. It's unbelievable when it comes to these areas. He just doesn't understand these things. And what happens when people don't understand them? They fight them. They fight them. It's the grief curve, right? What was I doing when I was not wanting to get the pain in? I was fighting. I was fighting that pain. I just didn't want to accept that my brother was gone. Um, and you can only create change when you start going to that depression, actually going, okay, things have changed. The world is so different now than it used to be. We live in a world where women don't depend on men like they used to. Our roles as men used to be that kind of provider, that savior. That's not our roles anymore. Our roles are actually to work to create a system that is good for everyone, to work with women, to and non-binary people. So I think everything has shifted for men. But what we don't necessarily have is enough men being role models or providing that voice. It was really interesting to me. Someone said to me, "What's really ironic is the men are the real role models by definition, and not shouty. This is this. Look at me. They're very humble, so they're very quiet. So we have to find ways to put a spotlight on those men, get those men to come out of the shadow. And yes, I totally being humble is an amazing quality, but we do need those men to step up and actually so that we can see a new generation, see a new type of man that is forging a path and being successful on that path. And I think for me, that success is really important. And when I say success, let's be really clear. Part of what we need to do as men is redefine what success is. Because for too long we've been defined by material goods, we've been
Yeah.
defined by success in our careers. And actually, listen, I talk about it a lot on LinkedIn, but me and my wife are childless not by choice. So I don't have kids. It's why I can do what I'm doing. Would I be doing what I'm doing now if I had kids? Probably not. I just wouldn't have had the time. So my token man is kind of my child. That's why I put a lot of my investment in, because I do see a world that is not fair, uh, and it's damaging also almost everyone. And it's been a joy for me to connect with men in a way that I never connected before, and that's both my friends and actually watching some of them on their own journeys has been incredible. But I really do see it, the power of letting men be their true, authentic selves. Josh Connolly, I'm using Josh Connolly's quote. He's a brilliant resilience
Yeah.
coach. I love Josh, but I interviewed him about 3 years ago, and he said it's not about fixing men. It's about giving them the space to be their true, authentic selves. And as I
Yeah.
said, I worked in a workplace where I had to be this hard-nosed
Yeah. Yeah.
CEO, and then all of a sudden I came out and I was able to be much softer. And so for me, that second bit is who the true me is.
So to finish, if you could give a message of hope to people listening to this podcast, sum it up in a couple of sentences, how would you encourage people?
I would just say, listen, the world's changing really quickly. I understand for some men that can be very confusing. It actually needs a lot of work on yourselves. And I would just say lean in, Lean into everything that's happening around equity, diversity, inclusion. If you got it in your business, lean in. And in the short term, it might just be listening more, getting a better understanding, but also within that leaning in, make sure you're okay. So I always say the same thing to men. If you're not okay, you're not in a position to be an ally. So look after yourself. I'm a huge advocate of therapy. It had a massive impact on me. Therapy, being able to afford therapy is a privilege. There are other things like Andy's men's club, men's circles are really powerful. Find something that one, you're investing in yourself and your well-being, both physical, mental, social. I'm going to put those three, but also then if you're ready, start leaning in and go and working out what your influence is, and then going, okay, how can I use that for good?
Cool. That's brilliant. I like that as a nice way to finish. How can people find you? Last thing.
Tokenman.org, LinkedIn. I post every workday now, which is quite a commitment. But I started it last year, and I've just tried to keep it. And hard as nails, I would just go to my LinkedIn post. If you type into Google hard as nails, you won't find us. We're still relatively new. There's quite a lot of other businesses called hard as nails, but go to my LinkedIn post. You'll see it on the top left straight away. It's signposted. That's the word I was looking
Perfect.
for.
Look, Daniele, thank you so much for your time. It's been an
Pleasure.
absolute pleasure talking to you as I knew it would be. It's been great having you here. Yeah, thank you, and hope you have a great rest of the day.
Thank you, mate, and you. Take care.